there is, because this country has been a melange of all different cultures from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Immigration is not a recent thing. What I recognized back in the 60s and 70s was a historic development of United States conquering lands and peoples of the Spanish speaking world, and a deliberate emphasis on Americanization. That's it. We can see at every step in our history in the United States resilience and regeneration.
Mm.
Sometimes we have to take, we're forced to take two or three steps backwards, but then we recover ground.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
Welcome to Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast que comparte nuestras historias sin censura. Yo soy Pam y el día de hoy we have a conversation with Dr. Nicolás Kanellos. Dr. Kanellos is a Brown Foundation professor of Latino literature at the University of Houston. He's the founder of Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage, established in 1992 to recover and make accessible all the written culture of Latinos in what became the United States from the 1500s to the present. It is the largest humanities research program dedicated to Latino history and culture. He's the author and compiler of some 20 books, including the first comprehensive anthology of Latino literature and thought, En Otra Voz, Antología de la Literatura Hispana de los Estados Unidos, Herencia, the Anthology of Hispanic Literature of the United States, Latinos and Nationhood, 2 Centuries of Intellectual Thought, Hispanic Immigrant Literature, El Sueño del Retorno, and Handbook of Hispanic Cultures in the United States. His latest book is the monumental reference work Latino Firsts, Trailblazers and Milestones in United States History. Dr. Kanellos is the director of the largest Latino publishing house in the United States, Arte Público Press. He received the Anderson Imbert Lifetime Achievement Award from the North American Academy of the Spanish Language, was elected to the Spanish Royal Academy for Arts and Science. President Bill Clinton appointed Dr. Kanellos to the National Council on the Humanities, and in 2024, President Joe Biden awarded Dr. Kanellos the National Medal for the Humanities. Bueno, obviously, after this bio, you know you're in for a treat. It was a pleasure, a joy, and an absolute honor to be able to interview Dr. Kanellos. I think I would have loved to have 4 hours with him just to ask him about all of the things that he's lived through and witnessed, and his passion for preserving our stories. And so it was such a joy. So I won't delay this any longer. Here's my conversation with Dr. Nicolás Kanellos. Welcome to Café con Pam. It's a pleasure to have you.
Muchas gracias, Pam. Es un gusto estar aquí contigo.
Igualmente.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your story. So the first question we always ask is, what is your heritage?
Okay, I am Puerto Rican, and on my father's side, Greek lineage. On my mother's side, I mean, it's everything.
It's all the things.
Right. It's Spanish, African, Indian, um, French, all together, which is kind of a composite of Puerto Rican culture, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And many Latinos, like we're all a nice combination, nice soup of all the
Hmm.
things.
Right.
So let's take us back to a little bit to the beginning. So you've always been hungry for knowledge. You always have, like, you started reading, you were exploring books and finding them and finding ways to learn and learn more. When did you realize you had this passion for Latino culture and covering our stories?
I think that began to grow in high school, and that really matured college. Um, it it started in high school because, of course, I spoke Spanish and I was pushed into Spanish classes, like like many of us are. And I, of course, I did very well in the Spanish classes, even though they didn't accept my dialect.
Yes, of course.
I was proud of my family, but I didn't see it reflected any place in the
Mm.
school curriculum, in the teaching, in the classes, in the books, all of that. And that only intensified in college. But all along, there was this juncture between, because I went back and forth to Puerto Rico and New York and New Jersey. All along, there was this juncture where the Puerto Ricans and Latinos in New York and New Jersey were always looked down upon and were marginalized, and in fact, the subject of yellow journalism always attacking us as criminals and druggies and everything else. When on the other hand, in Puerto Rico, we had complete society. You know, Puerto Ricans were, you know, governors, they were policemen, they were firemen, they were teachers, they were professors, they were lawyers, and you didn't see any of that back in New York or New Jersey, or Jersey City or New York City, right?
Yeah.
It was that the only place for us was as in criminality and juvenile delinquents.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to graduate school, again, following this trend because I spoke Spanish, I was encouraged to become a Spanish teacher. So that was my plan as an undergraduate. And then when I went to graduate school, my plan was to become a Spanish professor, professor of Spanish. But again, there was nothing there. There was nothing that reflected Latinos in the United States. Nothing that would say we had a heritage here. Nothing that said. And I went to the University of Texas for my PhD, master's and PhD studies, and it has the largest Latin American collection in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And very few Latinos or Puerto Ricans were to be found in that collection. This was back in the late 60s and early 70s. There was material on Puerto Rico, but not
Mm-hmm.
uh, for Puerto Ricans, Latinos in the United States and part as part of U.S. culture.
Wow.
And at the same time, I was working out in the community in the civil rights movement, and I was performing with a theater group in that followed the example of Luis Valdez and the Teatro Campesino. And it became very clear to me that there was a long tradition in the communities
Mm.
of theater, of literature, of culture, and discovered all of these things out there, but they never made their way into schools and libraries and into museums and into the depositories of a quote unquote American culture. So it was in graduate school when I really started doing the heavy research to find that legacy, that heritage.
So we could say that the lack of representation
Hmm.
is what gave you the hunger to find those stories, because it's almost like as if you were working alongside all of the people doing these things, but nobody was telling their story.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I got out of graduate school, my buddy and I started a magazine specifically because there were all of these writers around and artists around, and they didn't have any place to publish.
Mm.
So we started Revista Chicano Riqueña. That was in 1972. We got together and started it, published our first issue in '73, and became a forum for the kinds of things that we were looking for people to find and recover and to celebrate and to incorporate into education. And from there, uh, 8 years later or 7 years later, we started a publishing house. And consequently, today it's the largest and oldest Latino publishing house in the United States, Arte Público Press. And we have this big project that follows my dream. That's called Recovering the U.S. Hispanic uh, Legacy, right? and we research. We have been research since 1990 all of the documents and writing created by Latinos in the United States. We find them, we digitize them, and we have found hundreds of thousands of documents, testimonies, diaries, published books, newspapers. We have the largest collection of Spanish language newspapers, some 2,000 published
Wow.
before 1945. I mean, it just goes on and on. This iceberg that was out there that was completely ignored. And there are many reasons historically for why our legacy, our history, our contributions were ignored. And this show is too long to go into all the reasons why we were marginalized and forgotten about.
And it makes me curious, given that you grew up and you talk about the civil rights movement and how things were really hard, how the stories were erased, omitted, excluded. Do you see a correlation with the times we're living in now? And like, you live in Texas. And so, how do you see that reflection?
Yeah, yeah. I see that uh, what I recognized back in the 60s and 70s was a historic development of United States conquering lands and peoples of the Spanish speaking world and a deliberate emphasis on Americanization,
Mm,
using a melting pot theory that everyone would forget about where they came from, what languages they spoke, and become American. During the 20th century, that was the purpose of education, of public education, to blend all these people into an American, not an Italian American, Portuguese American, German American, etc., but American only speaking English, blah blah blah, right? So that was a long development as a consequence of the policy of expansion and conquest that made the United States what it is today. But today, in a short period of time, what we have is real political uh, movement to disenfranchise people of other cultures and what they consider to be other races. I don't believe in race, but they consider them to be other races or coming from, to use the president's term, shithole countries. This is such a lovely president to use that kind of language.
yeah.
Uh, and it's very deliberate. So the government, in a very, 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 very short period of time, is going after everything in government and education that will represent the diversity that has made this country strong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just want to impose one model of American, one religion for America, for the United States. You know, um, and it doesn't include us.
Right. And this is why your work is so important.
Hopefully we'll have readers. Hopefully we can continue to get our books and our knowledge into the curriculum everywhere from K through graduate school, as well as out to the general public, you
For
know.
sure.
But right now it becomes intense because the things that we have been researching, writing about, and I'm talking, my work has been mostly as a collaborator, as uh, a convener of scholars, working with lots of teams of scholars to do all this work, right? And so uh, hopefully what we have been working on for all these years since the 60s will not be erased with one government
Mm.
turn in office, unless that government decides to stay beyond its legality.
Which it's looking like he wants to.
He has said he has said as much. Yeah.
So, I mean, we can totally go into derail ourselves into that. But I want to talk about your Latino First book. So you have over 1,000 Latino firsts that have done incredible things, and of course, on the cover we have many people that we know of that their stories have been become global. But you also covered some things, some people that I had no idea about. And I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure I quote them correctly. So, por ejemplo, we have Felicitas Mendez.
Right.
Mendez versus Westminster in 1946. So Felicitas Mendez, along with her husband Gonzalo, they led a landmark civil rights case that ended the George school segregation in California.
That's correct.
Their victory laid important groundwork for Brown versus Board of Education and made California the first state to segregate schools. Everyone knows about Brown versus Board of Education, but not a lot of people know about Mendez versus Westminster. And so, how do you view that legacy and in today's education movement, especially with all the banned books and all of the erasure that is currently happening, even like in that's all the museums?
Hmm. Right. Well, uh, Mendez versus Westminster was just one of a number of legal antecedents that Latinos brought to the Supreme Court and other courts
Yeah.
to fight desegregation. And they were cited specifically by Brown versus Board of Education in coming into its historical decision. And, there were other cases on integrating juries, for instance, and, well, there are many, many, many others. So, what Mendez and others really are a history that began in the 19th century of Latinos trying to become part of the United States by doing learning American ways of protesting and gaining the rights that they were supposed to have as born in the United States. And that legacy has lives on today in a lot of the laws that were passed, including laws for bilingual education, for instance, many laws that look upon it as a civil right. You know, the language you speak is a civil right. You're allowed to, you have a human and civil right to speak the language you were born with, right?
Sí. Inglés, español, o lo que sea.
Exactly. So what's happening today is that there are attempts to reverse all of that, including the one basic right that came out of the Civil War that empowers all these other rights for people of Latino or immigrant extraction, etc. And that law is birthright citizenship.
Mhm.
After the Civil War, laws were passed by the Congress and signed by the president that said anyone born in the United States would be considered a citizen, have all the rights protected by the Bill of Rights and the Constitution.
Mhm.
Now, if we chip away at birthright citizenship, as the president and vice president and others want to do, then that erases all the other rights that we enjoy: the right to vote, the right to sit on juries, the right to be confronted by a peer in accusation and in a trial, you know, the right to speak your language.
Yeah.
There is, because this country has been a melange of all different cultures from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Immigration is not a recent thing. From the beginning, it was impossible for the United States to choose a national language, an official language, you know?
That's what we didn't have one for a long time.
Right. And in the 19th century, bilingual education, for instance, was common. There was
Yeah.
Swedish English education in Minnesota and Polish English education in New York and even Basque English in Idaho. It was all of this. And during World War One, they started to retrench, try to fight all of this diversity because they were especially afraid of the Germans as enemies.
Mm.
So they started outlawing German language in schools, etc., and that spread to some of the other languages. But in the constitutions of the states of Louisiana, Florida, Texas, Colorado, California, and New Mexico wasn't split off yet into New Mexico and Arizona. They all say that the language had to be respected and preserved. as well as, the culture and so on and so forth. That was the treaty with Mexico, but also it happened in Louisiana and Florida too, which had Spanish speaking backgrounds. So these are integral laws to the history of the United States that are being attacked, and that account for us as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's happening. I hate to be, on the negative, on the defensive there, but and I started doing all this before this happened, before these administrations. I was working on this
Totally.
here. Yeah, you know.
Like even before, which takes me to the next story of Alonso Perales, which I think we can tie that in with the language and the visibility. So Alonso Perales was a Mexican American lawyer, among the first Mexican Americans to practice law in the US. He co-founded LULAC, which still exists
Yes,
to this day.
the largest in civil rights. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Is the League of United Latin American Citizens, the oldest Latino civil rights organization, and they drafted its constitution and helped defeat anti-immigrant legislation. And so I think while the times that we're living in are really hard and we can see the attacks in the Latino community like everywhere, every day. I mean, I I'm seeing every day people, it's more, frankly, it's more people reporting than the news reporting, but I see reports of people, mothers being picked up by ICE, dropping the kids off, people just going off to work or living their life without doing anything wrong. And I think we can look back, and that's why I think your book is powerful, because we can look back at people that are like us, that were going through something similar back in time, which it's one of those like history repeating itself.
Oh, right. Of course, the largest deportation of Latinos in the United States took place during the Depression, when Mexicans and Mexican Americans were rounded up summarily by the local authorities and by the churches, and put on trains and sent to the border and dumped there. That's known as the repatriation.
Hmm.
It followed large scale, broad national propaganda against immigrants who were, quote unquote, stealing their jobs, right, during the Depression. And that has served as a model, along with the concentration camps that during World War II, the United States started for the Japanese Americans. So these two models are what are being looked back to by this present administration, both repatriating, quote unquote, or deporting. They just say deporting. Repatriation was a sugarcoating of
Yeah.
deportation during the Depression. But now, I mean, it's bald-faced. Deport them, and it doesn't matter that deport whole families. Doesn't matter that there are citizens in the family, what have you, and create these large concentration camps, like in, what is that called, Alligator in Florida. The
Alcatraz,
one that
yeah.
Alligator Alcatraz that they're starting in Florida, and other ones in South Texas. They're immense. They and
Yeah.
the Congress just gave them billions of dollars to build these concentration camps. I mean, we just need to look back in history to see this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then in the Depression, community people and labor union people, etc., tried to fight this, but what happened to them? Many of the leaders were deported, just like that.
Mm.
And that has always been one of the things, right? Because the many of the Congress people who protest against immigration really are the protectors of illegal immigration, because they get their money from the farmers, the big industrial farms, the industries, etc., that hire the illegal, quote unquote, illegal or undocumented immigrants to keep them enslaved state. So while they, out of one side of their mouth, they're yelling against immigration, on the other side, they want the illegal, undocumented immigrant to be available to them to work for cheap in polluting the lands and soils and rivers with, from their slaughterhouses and from their industrial farming techniques, etc. So it's a ruse. They love immigrants. They love them in the fields. They love them in the open heart. They love them cutting down sugar cane. The same kind of conditions that were existing under slavery. If you protested back then, you got whipped or hanged. Today, if you protest or do something, you get deported.
Hmm. Or detained. There's a lot of leaders, organizers that are being detained
Yes, they are. Yeah.
unlawfully just because they raised their voice and they said this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's we're living through heavy times, but I think what grounds me sometimes as I look at the reality of this moment, I look at history, I look at what other people have done before and what they've lived through and how they've overcome it, which I think going back to representation and learning from our stories is why it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In fact, that's it. We can see at every step in our history in the United States resilience and regeneration.
Mm,
Sometimes we have to take, we're forced to take two or three steps backwards, but then we recover ground. And
yeah,
so that these stories in Latino First are examples of us being persistent, of doing what it takes to overcome, and for coming back.
for sure. I was thinking as you were sharing, how do you see the youth? You're a professor, and so how do you see your students reacting to this, and what do you tell them?
Well, I'm a little isolated because I just teach PhD students, and most of the PhD students, a good number of the PhD students, maybe 90%, come from Latin America.
Which is another big thing.
They're all scared. They're all very scared that in fact, during the summer break, bunches of them did not go home for summer vacation. They stayed because they were worried they couldn't get back into the United States to continue their studies. This is horrible, for the
Mhm.
whole world, because we basically were teaching the world about democracy and everything else, everything the way our country runs, and consequently everybody wanted to come here to study in our great institutions, and now we're attacking the institutions, we're cutting off the immigration, we're making it difficult for foreign students to come here and learn about our culture, and thus go back to their countries and teach them what we're really about. I mean every form of communication is being affected by these policies.
For sure. So to bring it back to the book and your work, was it hard to narrow down the stories? I mean, you have over 1,000, but
Well, it was hard to find the information in the first place. Like when I
mm,
started doing this back in it's 1970s, 1980s, for instance, nobody knew there were Latinos in sciences. So how do you go about finding who they are, what they have contributed?
totally.
So what I had to do was I went to the libraries and I looked at the scientific journals and who was writing in them. And then I got the subscription lists of those journals,
Oh
and
my
then I
gosh.
got lists of the association memberships of the sciences, and then I wrote letters to all of them and asked for their vidas and their photos,
Wow.
A- and they answered. They sent me the
Nice.
information, right? So that's what I had to do with the sciences because no one had ever written about Latinos in science.
So you really had to dig through.
I had to, right?
That's wild.
Yeah. So that was the extreme, right? Others is a lot of the other information is because in my generation there was the first large generation of Latinos going to college.
Yeah.
So by the time I was doing this work, there were a number of Latino researchers and professors doing research and publishing books and articles. So I could read those. I knew how to get the hold of all of that, right? But
Mm,
otherwise, what I was doing throughout the whole process, throughout the 80s, 90s, up until the present practically, was reading all of the Latino magazines, reading all of the Latino newspapers, finding a name that was mentioned and trying to track them down. As of the mid 90s, the internet became helpful,
Right.
but it's not really super helpful until maybe 10 years ago, where you could just push a name in and then everything comes up, right?
Yeah.
But before that, it was like, subscribe to Latinos, subscribe to Hispanic executives, subscribe to whatever, and look for the names, see who's being covered, who's doing what,
Mm.
and that's what I had to do for many years. And now, of course, it's a lot easier. It's also easier, I have to confess, because the internet and places like Wikipedia, they use
Yes.
they use my books. they, they use my books to get the information.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah,
So you've done the work for the internet pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Oh my god. And then it makes me think, because hearing your research, and you did it by name, so I think like your last name is Greek, right? And
Hmm.
so I
Right.
wonder how many stories of Latinos were also kind of buried because they were multicultural.
Absolutely. There's so many. If you look at this book, if you go down the table of contents, you will see last names that are uh, English orient, Jackson, for instance,
Yes.
German, Dutch, French, you know, all over the map, right?
Yes.
Because one thing that has been constant about Latino culture, and maybe this is also Spanish culture because of the mixtures from from the Mediterranean and Africa, we blend.
We blend.
We didn't develop a resistance to miscegenation, that horrible
Mm.
term that was used in the United States in the 19th century and has sometimes survived. Miscegenation. They thought that was, impure. Oh, recent politicians have been talking about us poisoning their blood. That's the same concept.
So we bring it back to the caste system that the Spanish brought
Right.
to Latin America.
Yeah. But when the Spanish published those paintings of castas,
Claro.
where all the different mixtures,
Yeah.
it had already happened. They couldn't control it.
Yes.
So from then on, from the 16th, 17th century on, what is a Latino? It's someone that does not resist other cultures and other peoples. We blend, we mix readily, you know. We're not like other cultures that we know, some of them I won't mention from Northern Europe,
Which is,
that
I
have,
think, where we're pulling, kind of like the current administration is pulling
right.
from. It's
Yeah,
that book.
racist cultures, seeing other races as inferior and to be limited and fenced off
Mm.
from the true people, and that's what empowered American expansionism. Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny was an ideology developed in the early 19th century that said that the peoples of Northern Europe were meant to govern the world and to govern over all the other. And this is a term that was used in the US Congress to govern and control the bastard races.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
So much. I often think about, yo crecí en la Ciudad de Mexico, ¿no? And my partner's a white man from the Midwest. And we often talk about history. He studied history. And we, I tell him the history that I learned, which is not inherently right, but it's very different to the history that he learned,
oh yeah.
And when I talk about the caste system and how we literally saw the poster, or we went through the poster, and they really desglosaban, no? O
Hmm.
sea, when the Spanish came and then they started creating all the castes. He had no idea. Like, that's not something that people cover, or
Right.
that history books cover here. And so it's fascinating to also, to your point of us being a mix of cultures, also how we bring in our experiences into the adaptation and accepting the fact that we are all so vastly different, but at the same time, we are right now we're being scrutinized because we just simply look a certain way or not.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
So, what's your hope with Latino Firsts and with your many books that you've written? But this one is the one that is currently on rotation.
An earlier version of Latino First was used by uh, um, Hispanic serving colleges, institutions.
Nice.
They were using it to prepare kids for competitions, you know, where one college would send a team and challenge another college. They had this was all organized to see who would win, a trophy at the end of who knew more about Latino history and culture.
No way.
So they were using my book to prepare them.
That's awesome.
So, I hope that this finds some popular usage, like that. And I hope that just the information gets out. Also, like some of my books, what happens? People steal, people steal the information. You know,
Because it's it's research based.
yeah. Or
Like
in
Wikipedia.
fact, sometimes they steal the whole thing and they put it online and they call it something else. Like I think one was called La Plaza Latina or something like that. You clicked on it and it gave you this whole chronology that was my chronology with all the different you practically using my words, etc. Completely plagiarized. No
Did you reach
attribution.
out?
No, the information's getting out there.
I mean, I guess.
No, I mean
Yeah,
this
but
is
that's not
this is
right. Come on,
nah.
people, do better.
Well, if it, how can I put it? If it were a different type of book, you
Yeah.
know. But the purpose of this book and the purpose of a couple of my other books is to get the information out there so people, not only Latinos but non-Latinos, will find that these things are in the air. These are what made us as Americans. Like
Mm-hmm.
things that we take for granted. What were the three crops introduced by the Spanish mestizo mulattoes into the United States, but became the backbone of the industry throughout the South and Southwest? Sugar, cotton, and livestock.
Mm.
What would Texas be without livestock? Cattle, sheep, pigs. What would Louisiana and Florida be without sugar cane? What would uh, cotton? The cotton industry is gigantic in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and the South. What would the history of the United States be without cotton?
Yeah.
We take that for granted. Community property comes from laws that filtered down from medieval Spain through Mexico and into the laws of Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado and California. We couldn't be file a joint tax return with our husband and wife
Mm.
if it weren't for these concepts that came out of Spanish Mexican law. Impossible. By law, treating adopted children as natural born children, who can inherit and all that kind of stuff. That comes from Spanish Mexican law. You know, the right of women to inherit and own property. In the 19th century, English common law did not allow them to fully benefit from the property of her deceased husband,
Yes.
right? But Spanish women, not only, Spanish, Latina, Mexican women could own property, they could be businesswomen, they could do all kinds of things. And guess what? They got to keep their names. They didn't become the property of their
Mm-hmm.
husbands. They didn't have to wear their husband's brand all the time.
Yes.
You know, these are things
Yes.
that we take for granted that are part of the national culture, and they don't know where they came from. They came from us.
Like it's so frustrating, to hear the rhetoric and the narrative that it's being told about why Latinos are like invaders when we actually helped build this country. And so, what would you say to someone who is like, yeah, deport them all? It's a very loaded question, I know.
Oh, ay, ay, ay. That is the same attitude that Hitler said when he said, "There's a Jewish problem,
Mm.
and this is the way you can solve it." That's very, very similar.
And it's wild to see how people don't see it.
Hmm.
The blinders that people have, and they just only choose to see things from one lens. And I believe, I mean, why I do this work, to share our stories, to share different perspectives, to engage in conversation instead of fighting each other. It's also, I think, important.
It certainly is. And this, it's so wonderful that you have this program. This is, we need, we need 50 more of them to get the word out.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, otherwise, it's very hard, even for me. Who I run a publishing house. I'm a professor, but it's even hard for me to get the word out about this information.
Yes. Yeah. So you have this Latino First book. It has over 1,000 people in here. When you were going through all of the names and all of the accomplishments and all of the things, was there a disappointment that you were like, "Oh, I couldn't find someone who did this." So who do we need more of? What firsts are not in the book that need to show up?
Yeah, we don't have a governor of Texas, New York, or New Jersey, or Florida.
Wow.
We don't have a president of the United States.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
And because of gerrymandering, we're going to have hard time keeping our people in Congress.
Yes. Oof, that one's tough.
So let's start there, you know.
Yeah.
And finally, we got a Supreme Court justice. That was a super first.
One.
One, one in the whole history of the United States.
Yeah.
So, and we've been here a long time. So we've been here before the United States. So
Yeah. Before the
so
US was the US.
let's, that's the most obvious one. But otherwise, I think we have representation in so many different fields in the book.
So
You know,
many.
yeah, everything from medicine to astrophysics to astronauts to you know to to uh, tech to technology.
Mhm.
You know, the founders of Sprint, for instance. Sprint used to be the big thing in technology. You know,
Yeah.
uh, CEOs of airlines, CEOs of corporations, CEOs of you know at one point the world's largest corporation, Coca-Cola. You know, we have people who've made it, who've done marvelous things. But of course, they don't realize people don't realize that these accomplishments are there and have been part of making the U.S. what it is. Yeah.
I'm looking at Nita Margarita Cintron, Chief of Space Medicine at NASA. Diana Trujillo, the first Hispanic immigrant woman in NASA's Academy and Lead Engineer for Mars rover's robotic arm. So that story is she arrived with $300 and then she hosted the first ever Spanish language NASA broadcast of a Mars landing.
That's the other thing in Latino First, the place of women,
Yeah.
the leadership of women, the accomplishments of women. You know, right from the get go, it undoes the stereotypes about women in general and Latinas in particular.
Mhm.
We've had Latina political figures and labor organizers and industrialists and everything right from the early 19th century doing marvelous things, you know, and
Yeah.
then you know there's continue to be confronted with all of these stereotypes. This undoes that, hopefully. If you get to see, it's not an anomaly when you see a woman's name or a photo. It is not. It's a standard.
Mm. Yes, agree. So I'm not going to ask you who's your favorite story, but because it's like when people ask me all the time, who's your favorite guest? I'm like, come on. It's like asking a mother who's your favorite child, right?
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask you, a question about the stories. But before, let's take a quick coffee break, which we haven't. After all, we're at Café con Pam.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
So, Dr. Nicolás, what are you? Do you drink? Are you drinking coffee right now? Agua? Yeah, yo también. I'm drinking tea. I'm drinking tea. So it's in the afternoon. It's a little bit later for you since you're in Texas, and so it's not time for coffee anymore. But it's time for agüita. In my case, I'm drinking tea. But do you drink coffee?
Yes, I drink about 3 or 4 cups in the morning.
Wow, that's a solid amount.
My wife, Cristelia, is very religious about the coffee beans she buys. She buys the whole coffee
Okay.
beans and she mixes them herself. Then she grinds them herself. And she has this
Wow,
really, really good coffee machine, so
nice. So you get the good in the mornings,
yeah, yeah,
and you drink like the 4+ cups of coffee that you drink in the morning are from your house, or do
yeah,
you
from the house. And when I go to the
nice
gym, I'm taking I'm taking
from the house?
right from the house,
Nice. How do you drink your coffee?
black,
Straight up, just how it
straight up.
comes.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. On my end, I'm drinking tea with a lot of herbs. I'm not going to mention them because there are too
Hmm.
many, but that's kind of like my afternoon drink, and it helps me sustain energy. Instead of drinking coffee, I drink tea. And it's not tea with caffeine, actually. It has
Mhm.
ginger and lemongrass and various herbs that give energy, but it's not necessarily caffeine because
Mhm.
I'm I'm committed to not over caffeinate myself after I did for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the show. Here's the thing: Latina families have been saving money forever. From reusing plastic containers for comida, folding up plastic bags under the sink, and diluting dish soap with water. The last thing we need is to pay fees to access our money, right? Pues, in case you didn't know, BMO customers have access to 40,000 fee-free ATMs across the United States. Plus, their BMO Smart Advantage checking account has no monthly maintenance fee. Learn more about how BMO can help by visiting bmo.com/checking. bmo.com/checking. Conditions apply. Accounts provided in the United States by BMO Bank and a member FDIC. Let's talk about something we all deserve: financial empowerment. Whether you're tackling debt, planning for retirement, or starting that dream business, navigating your finances can feel overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be, thanks to Savvy Ladies. Savvy Ladies is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women like you take control of your financial future. They offer free resources, webinars, and my favorite, a free financial helpline where you can connect one on one with trusted financial experts. And yes, it's completely free. Whether you're just starting your financial journey or need guidance on a specific challenge, Savvy Ladies is here to provide quality and trusted advice you can count on. So why wait? Visit savvyladies.org today and connect with the financial helpline to get the personalized support you deserve. Your journey to financial independence starts here. That is savvyladies.org. Your path to financial freedom can start today. So I'm curious, not necessarily who's your favorite story, but is there a story that you found that you may or may not have, doesn't have to be in the book, but is there a story that deeply moved you, that you remember, that you're like, you know what, this one is like, oh, tugged at me.
Well, there are so many stories of coming out of poverty, and facing all kinds of barriers
Mm,
and then prevailing, you know, and uh, maybe because of similar backgrounds or facing some of the same things. Um, Sonia Sotomayor's rise from the Bronx, which was known as one of the most depressed poverty areas in the United States back when she was growing up. And there were, buildings were being trashed and they were just one vacant lot after another, mounds of bricks, etc. And she came out of that background and was able to get a a superior education and then ultimately land at the Supreme Court. I wouldn't say land, making her way to the Supreme Court is, is really an inspiring story, for everyone. And I hope kids pick up her books,
Yeah.
her children's books, and they can, it helps to fight despair and helps to to reanimate, even if it's a myth, that idea of the American dream, that you can make your
Mm,
way. I believe that, that people can make their way. I don't believe that there are any children that um, cannot learn. I believe, other than, any to say there are disabled children, but I think that all children deserve a good education, and I believe that all of them can achieve, you know, and we have 1,001 stories to prove it,
mm,
rising from the fields like Jose Hernandez, who was from a migrant farm worker family, going back and forth from Mexico to California with the crops, and eventually the teachers said the family should settle down. They did, and he made his way through college and became an astronaut.
hmm.
And what it took for him to become an
It
astronaut,
took a lot.
by the time he made it, he was so old. He was just about to be too old to be an astronaut. But he had repeated and repeated and struggled. He did everything that it would take to become an astronaut. If he was afraid of water, being a land bound crop picker, he was not a swimmer. He was far from the ocean. He was afraid of water, but he had to learn to scuba dive and he had to learn to go down into the deep water and salvage equipment, etc. So he did it. He found out that on the satellite, on the space station, it was shared with Russians, and it would be an advantage if someone spoke Russian. So he went and he learned to speak Russian. He did
Yes.
everything, whatever it took, and that story is not unique.
Yeah.
So many of our achievers have done whatever it takes to achieve and to make that important for the community, because one and all of them, I think this is also common about Latinos. They see what they're doing as advancing the community, and they see where they're at as a community endeavor. They didn't get there by themselves. The community was helping and pushing them and behind them, starting with the family community and then going out to the broader community.
Mm,
It goes against this ideology in the United States of the self-made person. We're not self-made. There's so many people who contribute to what we do, who we are, etc. But Latinos have this idea about family and community, and it's repeated. Even in books that we publish in Arte Público Press, we have a book called Latino Leaders. They're monologues, interviews with Latino leaders and how they got to where they are. Almost every single one of them says family, community.
mm. Latinos are community made for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we carry that. It's a through and through line for a lot of Latinos, regardless of the country of origin, that
Hmm.
it is often, even I see it with my clients who are from all over Latin America, and community care is something that's very much embedded in our core. And I agree with you that everything we do it's more so to benefit everyone,
Hmm.
because historically we've been excluded so much that when we create, I mean, look at your work, like you're sharing the stories. And I think this is a narrative that frankly it needs to be pushed more, how our work is not just to benefit this country, and it has been for a long time, but also when Latinos show up, communities get better. Like, I will own this, that we moved into this neighborhood is very white, and now everyone waves at us, because we started saying good morning to people. And so I think we can own that, to say where we show up, things do genuinely, authentically do get better because what we do is for us
I'm
to
convinced.
improve our circumstances.
Yeah, I agree.
Bueno, Dr. Canelos, Nicolas, tell me where we can find you, where we can find the book, where people can learn more about your incredible work. I mean, you have a Medal of Honor, no? That President Biden gave you,
Yes, it's the National Humanities Medal he gave in October 2024.
the National Humanities Medal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to be able to talk to you. But tell us where we can find you.
Okay. You can better bookstores should have Latino First, but you can also find it on Amazon, and you can find it directly at Visible Ink Press online. You can order directly from the publishing house. And other books that I have in Arte Público books are at artepublicopress.com, so they're easy to get. Um, so yeah, I'm not hard to find.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll have all the links in the show notes shared on there. And I will make an invitation for listeners to request Latino First in their local library
That would be great.
because that helps authors grow their books. And when we request them, local libraries requesting books in local libraries is really helpful. So if you want to read it, I think it should be available at every local library. So go to your local library and ask them to bring it.
Yeah, I think the young people, junior high, high school students would really benefit from this, as well as college students. But just families, they can sit around and page through the books and say, "Oh, I've heard of this person," or "I knew that person," etc. "Oh, they're from this.
Yeah.
They're from our own town here." You know.
Right. Well, even like for me, when I got the book, I was flipping through it. Obviously, frankly, I didn't read the whole thing, but it's one of those because I don't know if it's meant to read from one in one sitting, but it's one of
Oh
those
no,
books that if I need inspiration, I can literally open it up and like if I'm feeling down, for example, I just opened it. Amalia Perez, 1956. She became the first Latina artist to win a major award in the US, first prize at the Gulf Caribbean Art Exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. So she was an artist, and so that could like alone give me some inspiration. There's so many categories, and it can just be it's one of those like, give me the message, let me flip through it and see what I need to hear today. It's great. Last few questions. Do you have a remedy you want to share with us?
a remedy. Read,
Read. Ooh.
read. Don't just don't just thumb through the telephone.
Don't just scroll.
Yeah, just don't scroll. Actually, read and read books. Read magazines.
Read real books. Yeah,
People are
for
forgetting
sure.
that the deep, deep understanding and learning comes from reading, not from scrolling.
And reading long, I was going to say long distances, but reading longer than a minute video.
Hmm. Exactly.
Because I noticed, so it's said now that people's attention span is between 3 to 7 seconds.
Hmm.
And I notice when I love books. So I like these are my currently reading books, those over there. And when I sit down and I put music and I make sure I set myself up for success to read, I notice I've counted actually. Sometimes it's 20 seconds and I'm like distracted. My brain immediately wants to be like, what else can we do? It's not only a practice, but it's a practice that needs to be practiced often.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can actually say that reading saved my life.
Mm,
It did. It not only saved my life, it made my life. So what can I
for
say?
sure. And you make things for us to read now. And do you have a quote or mantra that you live by right now?
I don't think so.
Like even something that you may have read or I don't know, right
Oh
now
yeah.
in this
Well,
moment, no?
my mantra is don't give up.
Mm,
You know, and my staff at the publishing house and my students, it's always like, don't give up,
keep going.
keep
Yes.
going.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam. Thank you for sharing your work and your story and for your all the things that you have done to make sure that our stories are being shared and known in the world.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's been a pleasure. It's a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bueno, listeners. Whew, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I had truly a lot of fun. I felt it was special. This interview, I truly think it's one that needs to be preserved as the work that Dr. Canelos has created and done and continues to work on, frankly, is so powerful and so necessary for us to remember all the things that our people have gone through and continue to go through. Let's not forget that we are still in the fight. And I think for me it was reassuring. It gave me a lot of hope and a lot of inner fire to remember that everyone has a way to contribute. And Dr. Canelos chose to contribute by preserving our stories, literally. And so now there's many of places and like you heard in the bio, I mean, he's just done so much. So I think it was a powerful episode for me. I hope it was also for you. I would love to know your thoughts, your comments. Drop comments if you're watching on YouTube. Send a DM or screenshot and tag on the socials and tell me what you think about this episode because it's not often that I get to interview an elder such as Dr. Canelos, and I liked it. There's so much to explore. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad you're here, truly. Y como siempre, bueno, stay shining. Café con Pam is created con mucho amor by our small but mighty team. Content production by Nancy Jaimes. Podcast management by Maru Linardi. Social media and marketing by Brenda Figueroa. And me, your host, Pam Covarrubias. To keep the cafecito brewing and the healing flowing, join the Supporters Club for only $5 a month and access early episodes, behind the scenes vibes, and exclusive minisodes you won't hear anywhere else. Screenshot this episode and tag me and share what resonated. I love seeing your takeaways. Follow on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's keep the conversation going with us on social media at Café con Pan Podcast because your voice always matters there. We love being on Instagram and Facebook. Gracias for listening to Café con Pan, a Spread Ideas Move People production. For more episodes, guest info, or resources, visit cafeconpam.com. And if you're healing from calladita culture and don't know where to start, you can take the quiz. cafeconpam.com/quiz for Tia Wisdom and cariño just for you.
Sabrosura pa' ti que